Good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock, and it's time for 5 reasons why you shouldn't harm your family, loved ones during quarantine. I am so happy to talk to you today because there's actually a little hope in Oakland County. They just issued a curve for Oakland County, exclusive to Oakland County, that shows that our curve is flattening and there are less cases per day in Oakland County. So the stay-at-home thing is working, and I hope that you're all feeling well. And I appreciate you tuning in every day. Those of you who have been regulars, it's fun. And as I promised today and the rest of this week, we're going to kind of highlight educational issues. There are no updates on other fronts today. There's been nothing new in regard to jails or inmates or bonds or parenting time or protective services or some of the other topics we talked about last week. So for those updates and current situations, those videos are still on the Facebook page for Kirsch Daskas, and you can definitely check them out there. I didn't realize that you could watch them forever and ever, but you can. So a couple educational announcements did happen today. Over 13 universities in the United States have waived testing as part of their admissions requirements. Some of those schools are Tufts, Oregon State, my alma mater, Boston University, Case Western, and then University of Chicago, Kalamazoo College already did it a while ago. But today that really seems to be the trend. They are citing that it is indefensible for universities to miss out on qualified and great students because of the rigidity of the testing requirement. The articles are talking about how exceptional children could be missed because they either do not have the ability to take the standardized tests or they're just being canceled. They talked about the psychological impact this is having on young people, especially juniors and seniors, who really their lives are kind of upside down because they don't know what's going to happen and what could inhibit them moving up. It is expected that the governor will announce today or tomorrow. She already gave her morning briefing. It had nothing to do with education, so I'm guessing it's going to be tomorrow, that the children, students will not return to school in Michigan. And that will then change what schools are obligated to do for both general ed students as well as special ed students under the law. So I did post kind of a draft of what she's going to announce. And so if that is on the Kirsch Daskas Facebook page already, as well as on my personal page. And if for some reason you can't open it, just send us a message and we're happy to send it to you directly. A couple resources that you should be aware of. If you just Google Council for Exceptional Children, COVID-19 information for special ed, and you will get just an overflow of things to think about during this time. I was going to do kind of a little overview and then give you guys some questions and answers that I think are questions people are asking and probably don't know who to ask. So as you know, if you're watching and you have questions, just type them in, and I always go back and answer them all, even if they're not in order. And so let's talk about education. First and foremost, as everyone knows, there is an obligation under the law for every citizen in Michigan to receive actually, you don't even have to be a citizen. That is not true. A free and appropriate education that is guaranteed by federal law that education will be provided. Note, it's appropriate education. It's not the best education that is guaranteed by our laws. And specifically, we're talking about within the American with Disabilities Act, the section that is otherwise known as the IDEA. And it should be noted that now that the IDEA is being applied during what we'll call a health emergency, it really wasn't for this. It doesn't really have provisions for this. It considered some instances where school would be closed, but certainly it's really never happened before. A lot of the guidance using is from 2009 during the H1N1. So it's outdated and it's not on this scale. So in looking at the different documents that have been published and guidance to schools, both from the Federal Department of Education as well as in Michigan, it's really important that their announcements do not confer any additional rights. They don't expand IDEA or Section 504 or Title II, which is the funding part of the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. It's really important to remember that if you want to actually look at the law, it's at http://sites.ed.gov/IDEA. And I'm just going to hold this up for a minute for those of you, whoops, there it is, so that you can see it, write it down, and it's a good resource to have. So that being said, let's move on to some of the questions. The first question is the local educational agency, otherwise known as your district, required to continue to provide a free, appropriate public education to students with disabilities during a school closure caused by COVID-19 outbreak? And the answer is, we don't know. Because, as I mentioned earlier, it is nothing that was ever considered before. If a local educational agency closes to stop the spread or slow the spread of COVID-19, and it is not giving educational services to a gen ed student, they do not have to give them to special ed students. Remember that both of the federal laws, the IDEA and Section 504, they mandate that the playing field be level, that there's equal access to education and to learning between a general ed student and a special ed student. And it's all about evening the playing. So if general ed students aren't getting it, if general ed students are getting it optionally, then that's the same thing that has to be available or not available for special ed students. It is definitely, as I said before, uncharted waters. And once the school reopens, which, as I said, in the next 2 days, we're probably going to have an announcement that our schools aren't reopening, then every effort has to be made to provide the special ed services and related services to the child in accordance with their IEP or their Section 504 plan. One of the things that also has to be considered at that point is compensatory services. What are compensatory services? Compensatory services are different accommodations or different methods of transmitting learning to students to make up for time when learning wasn't available. And that is something that really is going to be on a case-by-case basis. We talked about yesterday the need to be communicating with your counselors or with your directed study teacher or the special ed administrator, whoever it is, anyone who sits at that table for the IEP meeting or for the Section 504 plan creation meeting. These educators and providers and guiders, I'm going to call them, are all available, by email at a minimum. And you can work with them to find out what you should be doing to keep the field level. In addition to that, if they are providing online education to general ed students, they must provide it to special ed students with accommodations. And as we talked about yesterday, some of the accommodations are going to be different. Some of the accommodations are going to be impossible. So we have to be creative, and we really have to communicate to make sure that our children are not falling behind. It's really, an additional challenge that I think parents realize, but I'm not so sure how obvious it is to educators, is children with special needs or with disabilities or any impediment to learning, they thrive on routine, and they thrive on schedule and structure, and the same thing happening every single. We're probably in, day, 13-ish, 12-ish in Michigan now, of staying at home. And I think that it's important to remember that. And when you are doing your education at home, obviously high schoolers, although sometimes they don't have great attention either, they're going on their computer, they're doing it themselves. But now as parents, you're the teachers and you know your child better than anyone. So if you're doing the online learning and your child starts jumping all over the couch, running around the room, has no interest, you may want to stop and resume later. You may want to have a snack and continue, or you may want to just change to a different room. And I know these sound like really obvious ways to keep a child interested. Change the device that you're doing it on if you can. Just different little things to remember. I always say to lawyers, and I train them, remember who you are as a person, not just as a lawyer. And this is kind of one of those circumstances as well. Remember who you are wearing your parent hat and what you know is best for your child, even though you're now stepping in as their teacher. It's also pretty hard for kids to understand that you don't know what you're doing. You never did this before. Your teacher knows how to do this. They've been doing it every day. They went to school. They have degrees. They know, so we need to talk to our kids about how we are not trained teachers. We're doing the best we can. And, sometimes it's helpful to hear them and listen to them. And when they say, well, Mom, my teacher sits on the left side of me when we're doing this, and you got to move because that's what they know and that's what they're used to and that's what's good for them. So let's not forget that. I divert to that tangent for a minute. Okay, next question is, must a local district provide special education and related services to a child with disability who is absent for an extended period of time because the child is infected with COVID-19 while the school remains open? I'm going to answer this really quickly because we do have some people watching who are not in Michigan, and I don't know if your schools are open or closed or what's happening there. So the quick answer is that everything in special ed law deals with things that happen in less than 10 days or more than 10 days. And certainly when a child is out of school because of the illness for more than 10 days, then you have to think about, does the IEP team need to reconvene? are we delivering educational services as efficiently and effectively as we can? What if the child is unable to learn because of the illness? What if they're sick with something else? And, as I said at the beginning, this is evolving every single day, and the law never really contemplated all of this. So it's a time to be creative, communicate, and definitely, don't rush to get through it. Work through it. And if there's something that you need, or something that you're having troubles with, communicate with the school, because the education does need to be provided. And if it's a circumstance where the child is too sick to learn or to participate in online school, or if some teachers are not doing online, they're sending home educational packets or things like that, then that's when the question of compensatory services or compensatory education would come up, when the child was well enough. And again, you have to catch them up, and you have to even the field. And that's what all of this is about when we talk about special education law under the American Disabilities Act. The next question is, I'm not going to do that one. If anyone is involved in doing an IEP right now through Zoom or some other video means, a couple things to keep in mind. First of all, it's not a valid IEP if the players who would be at the table when you are sitting there are not part of it, unless the parent waives their presence. So there must, according to the law, a general education teacher. There must be a special ed teacher. There must be parents. There must be the child. There must be the director of special education or someone else in that capacity. There must be and it may be the same person who's the social worker or the school psychologist or the speech therapist, but all of those professionals who know the child in the educational environment must be present unless you waive them. Of course, additional people can be present if there's a tutor, a nanny, a grandparent who have been involved in learning or in educating or doing homework or whatever it is at home and have a good relationship with the child. They can be included too. If you're doing one of these virtual IEPs, if you're doing an updated IEP, something that has been included recently is a consideration for what distance learning would look like if the outbreak requires school to close. Well, obviously, Michigan schools have already closed, and so this is a provision that we should make sure is in our IEPs going forward, that basically says that special education and related services should be, if they are at an alternate location, that's a possibility depending on what the order is with stay home, which in our case, you cannot do it in an alternate location. Or it should have a provision of online or virtual instruction, instructional telephone calls, or other curriculum-based instructional activities, different websites, or different hard resources, books, coloring activities. It depends on the age of the child. We talked about Quizlet yesterday. We also talked about Brain Pop and a few others. And certainly you guys can put in the comment what your favorite educational websites are that you like to take your kids to. And they get help from Khan Academy. KHN is another one. That's mostly high school, but all good resources, and feel free to share yours as well. The other issue with doing this distance learning part of the IEP is obviously funding, and you should know that in Part B of the IDEA, it does allow for districts to use the federal funds to provide at-home services to continue education. So money and affording it in financial situations should not be part of the equation. And it specifically states in Part B that it is to distribute general COVID-19 guidance. I'm sorry, it cannot be used for distribution of general COVID-19 guidance or to carry out activities that are not specific to children with disabilities. It also cannot be used to administer vaccines or testing kits. So it is only for the purpose of educating special ed students at home. Other sort of interesting things that are going on or continuing to go on. Does anyone have any, before I go to something else, anybody have any questions about education, any great resources you want to share? This is your moment. I'm going to scroll through to see if anybody posted any questions. I did change my glasses. Thank you for noticing. I also have a sweater on instead of a sweatshirt, and lipstick. So we are getting a little more sophisticated now that we're in this is episode 4, actually. So, okay. I don't see any questions related to education. I guess that's a good thing. One thing that will be changing upon the governor's announcement is that the districts that have optional online learning now are going to have mandatory online learning. And I guess the best news of all is that all seniors who were on track to graduate as of March 24th, 2020, will graduate. They will not necessarily have a graduation, but they will graduate. In addition to that, all students K through 12 will move up to their next grade, assuming that they were on pace to where they should be to advance to the next grade as of March 24th, 2020. So those are updates, as well as the sweep of universities who are giving all juniors and any seniors affected a waiver of standardized tests, both the SAT and ACT. Many universities today announced that they will now not consider that as part of the admission process for our current juniors moving up to seniors, and some seniors if it's applicable. So that's the education update for today. I believe that we will have the educational consultant tomorrow. We're still firming things up, and we will have a director of special ed one of the days at the end of the week. I have a question. Yay. How does a parent best prove regression and the need for ESY? That's a really hard question, but I think that, especially because I don't have information about the child in front of me, but these are my quick answers. In the IEP, there should be measurable goals, and assuming that they are specific and they are appropriate measurable goals, meaning that they are measurable, then you should be able to show the regression by, from this date to this date, this goal was met, and from this date to this date, this goal was not met, and the differences were A, B, and C. I think that that's the only way that you can. Most IEPs that I review, and this is a problem across our entire state, every district, it's not unique to, certain socioeconomic districts versus other socioeconomic districts. It would be, in that scenario, you would be looking at if a substitute teacher were to come into the class would they be able to measure the progress? Would they know what to do? And that's the problem that I see with IEP goals all the time, that they're just not specific enough, or they're not, it's an improvement of 20%. 20% of what? So, everyone should look at their IEP goals and should really make sure that everyone looking at it can tell. It shouldn't say that their vocabulary will increase 20%. It should say their vocabulary will increase by 20 words or 30 words or whatever it is. And the data is really important. I did have, thank you for sending this in. A lot they're using in this person's district, they use data before and after breaks to determine if they have missed out on education and if those compensatory services are required. As another option that these programs have is always extended year, but the governor is trying to avoid that by not causing these missed days to. She's waiving the 180-day count, essentially, is what she's doing. So that is basically that. So, IEPs, do need to be updated. As I said, the IDEA didn't ever consider this, so they're doing the best they can. Be patient, and hopefully all our kids will continue to learn and continue to go on in life to where their next step is. Is there any other questions? Any other comments? So with that, I'll just give you a brief overview of other episodes if you want to go back and watch them. We talked a lot about protective services and some of the things that they're doing as essential workers, which is the number one reason that you should not harm your family during quarantine. We talked about interactions with the police. Oh, that's one more thing. Interactions with the police update. Today is the day. You cannot be driving for work purposes without the paper, without the letter that says that you're an essential worker. If you need a copy of the letter, I hoped that it would be on our website by today. I am working with those people who know how to do the website to get it posted up there. But if you do need it, just send me a quick message or email. I'll attach a sample and send it back to you right away. My email address is lisa@kdlawgroup.com. Or feel free to call 248-792-3060. A lot of people have been saying, I need one of those letters, but my employer doesn't know how to write it or what to write or what it should include. I'm absolutely happy to just send it to you free, of course. And, let's just abide by the law. We also talked about jails and prisons and the difficulties of in that environment. What happens if you get arrested? We talked about parents' culpability for kids being kids. We talked about sexting and texting. We talked about drinking and partying, and things like that. We've talked about parenting time and child support and how those orders need to be enforced, or we need to file motions to modify them. We also talked about bond, and if you have loved ones who are at risk or are waiting to be sentenced or are near the end of their sentence, those three categories, we are happy to file emergency bond motions and try to get your loved one out so that they can be safer, get health care. There is only limited health care within our jail and prison system. You can read the governor's last directive that dealt with jails and prisons. It was from either Friday or Sunday, but I gave the number when we talked about this on Friday. So that would have been episode 2. And you can look that up, and they will all be on the website when we figure that out. And then Lastly, I guess, since nobody has any more questions, I will tell you the biggest reason that you do not want to harm your loved ones during quarantine is because very few people look good in horizontal orange stripes. So with that, stay well, stay healthy, stay home, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye.